From the moment I was little, I learned how to exist without being seen, heard, or acknowledged. My family was large, loud, and always brimming with confidence, jokes, and stories, making me feel invisible. When my parents' 30th anniversary approached, my siblings had planned every detail. I was only asked to contribute my share financially. No input, no ideas, no creativity. "We've got it covered," my sister said, and I chipped in, like I always did, quietly, assuming it wouldn't matter. On the night of the party, everyone was gathered in the dining room for what my brother called the big reveal. When the curtain dropped, a hand-painted family tree sprawled across the wall, stretching from floor to ceiling. People gasped, clapped, some even wiped away tears. My father laughed. My mother dabbed at her eyes. My sister beamed as though she had won an award. I clapped too, but my eyes were scanning, searching for one name, mine. The mural was stunning, intricate, adorned with sweeping branches, gold accents, and tiny portraits. It included every cousin, every in-law, babies, even the family dog's paw print. But not me. I checked again. My sister's name stood proudly with her twins and husband, my brother's under a proud scroll that read, Regional Sales Manager, and my cousin Emily, unmarried like me, had her own leaf complete with her rescue cat painted in watercolor. Out of 112 names, every single person in that room appeared except me. Embarrassment hit first before anger or sadness. A burning, creeping heat under my skin, a feeling of being both invisible and exposed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and sat on the closed toilet, staring at the tiles and letting the reality sink in. I had paid for this mural, approved by my parents, planned meticulously by my siblings, and yet I had been left out. It wasn't an accident. Oversights don't survive multiple drafts, deposits, and final approvals. This was deliberate. After 30 minutes alone, I washed my face, reapplied lip balm, smoothed my hair, and walked back in, as if nothing had happened. The mural remained the star of the evening. Guests took selfies, pointing out their names with pride. I approached my mother casually. "Don't you think something's missing from the mural?" I asked. She blinked, feigning confusion. "Missing someone?" "Me," I said, lightly. Her expression barely changed. "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to be on it. You know you're not really into this kind of thing." My father snorted from behind her, muttering that I'd just roll my eyes at it anyway. They had seen the final draft, approved it, and were comfortable erasing me, so I said nothing. I walked to the car and drove away. Not home, not yet. I had quiet, careful work to do, tasks I'd been preparing for without realizing it my entire life. That night, I opened old folders filled with bank statements, receipts, and documents that had accumulated over the years, evidence of money quietly hidden, borrowed, or moved. The mural had been the catalyst. If they wanted to erase me, I would show them that I could be seen and that I remembered everything. For the first time, I felt a spark of agency. No one had noticed my absence during the party. No one had asked if I was okay. They assumed compliance. But the moment I started sifting through the details, the quiet patterns of favoritism, the hidden finances, I realized how much power I actually had. I didn't need drama or confrontation to claim it. I just needed patience, attention, and the meticulous record I had kept all my life. Over the next 2 days, I worked quietly, reviewing every document, every email, every bank transfer I had kept tucked away. What I discovered wasn't small. My parents had been hiding money, large sums that passed through my siblings' names, funding vacations, college funds, and loans that were never repaid. My siblings had benefited knowingly or unknowingly. I held the paper trail in my hands, meticulously organized, labeled, and dated. Every detail was there, and suddenly the mural no longer mattered. It wasn't about exclusion anymore. It was about accountability. I requested a family brunch. I didn't announce anything dramatic. I just asked them to come to my apartment for a casual gathering. My sister arrived first, as punctual as ever, with her twins in tow. My brother showed up next, bragging about work achievements before he even entered the room. My parents followed, carrying a bottle of wine, smiling as if the mural had been a perfect success. We sat small talk, filling the space with polite rhythm. Then I slid a thick envelope across the table, my voice calm, steady. Inside were photocopies of documents, bank transfers, property deeds, emails, the evidence of everything I had quietly noticed for years. My sister frowned at the first sheet. My brother leaned closer, confused. My mother's hand trembled as she recognized her own signature. "You forgot me on the mural," I said lightly, "but I haven't forgotten anything." Silence settled. Heavy, suffocating silence. My father tried his usual chuckle, but it broke mid-sentence. "Where did you get these?" my sister demanded, her voice tight. "Doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is that I know, and now so do you." They had been careless or arrogant enough to think erasing me was harmless. They hadn't considered that someone could watch, remember, and compile the evidence of their choices. I had spent my life quiet, unnoticed, pretending to be ordinary, hoping it would protect me. But now their ignorance had given me power. And I realized that power wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about recognition, about making invisible things visible. The brunch ended with no applause, no congratulations. They left with faces tight and pale. My sister called her lawyer. Panic cracked through her voice in a way I had never heard before. My parents looked helpless, unsure how to respond. My brother, usually the confident one, avoided eye contact. The mural, once a symbol of pride and celebration, had become irrelevant. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate. I simply returned to my life calm, quiet, and increasingly aware of the strength I had always held. For years, I had masked myself, pretending to belong, studying social cues, mimicking others, hiding my differences. School and academia had been my sanctuary. Science programming and logic were consistent, predictable, and unjudging. I excelled where social interactions often left me drained and misunderstood. My PhD, my lectures, my career, they were proof that I didn't need their approval. And yet I had given it anyway, quietly contributing, hoping for recognition that would never come. After the brunch, the first public acknowledgement of my story arrived in a surprising form. An organizer from a neurodivergence and mental health summit had seen a blog post I wrote months ago about high-masking autistic women in academia. They invited me to speak as a keynote, an opportunity I almost ignored. I wasn't a public speaker, never had been, but this felt significant. I accepted, spent a week crafting my talk honestly, including the story of the mural, my exclusion, and what it had revealed. I wanted to explain, not accuse. I wanted to illuminate, not attack. When I delivered the talk, I shared how life had taught me to exist quietly, to study the behaviors of others, to adapt endlessly, only to find myself erased from the simplest acts of recognition. I told them about the mural, the 112 names, and the one missing. I explained how it wasn't just a wall. It was a reflection of invisible hierarchies, favoritism, and deliberate exclusion. The live stream attracted attention, and by morning clips had thousands of views. Comments poured in, strangers and acquaintances alike, recognizing the quiet cruelty of being systematically erased. The story didn't end there. My sister sued, claiming reputational damage, alleging my narrative implied defamation. I had anticipated it somewhat, but I didn't back down. My lawyer and I organized every piece of evidence, payments, emails, drafts of the mural, screenshots of the group chat. The courtroom became a place of quiet justice, each document speaking louder than words. The judge, jury, and observers saw facts, not speculation, and the case was dismissed. My sister was ordered to cover all legal costs. After that, their carefully constructed family image began to unravel. Partnerships dissolved. Brand deals collapsed, and hidden fractures came to light. My parents downsized, moving to a modest condo. I wasn't the sole cause, but I had become the catalyst. My quiet observation, my careful attention, and the fact that I refused to be erased allowed truths to surface. For the first time in my life, my presence had weight, not as someone to be tolerated, but as someone whose awareness mattered. After the lawsuit, I expected some kind of triumph, a rush of vindication, but it didn't come that way. Instead, I felt calm, steady, and for the first time, entirely untethered from the need for approval. All those years of pretending, masking, mimicking, smiling politely, it had kept me safe, but it had also kept me invisible. Now I didn't have to perform anymore. I didn't need to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I realized that my value wasn't tied to anyone else's acknowledgement, and that was the most liberating truth I had ever known. The quiet power I had cultivated over the years through meticulous observation, careful record-keeping, and relentless self-education was finally mine to wield on my own terms. No longer was I the invisible sibling, the overlooked contributor. I had tools, knowledge, and proof that allowed me to exist independently. The mural, once a symbol of exclusion, now represented the catalyst for my awakening. It was ironic. A wall meant to erase me had become the reason my voice could no longer be ignored. I returned to my work with renewed focus. My research, teaching, and consulting became more intentional. I wasn't just working for recognition anymore. I was working to create a life that aligned with my values. I took on projects that mattered, collaborated with colleagues who respected and understood me, and started writing more openly about the experiences I had spent a lifetime hiding. Masking in public had been exhausting, and unmasking wasn't instant. It was a slow, deliberate process of shedding learned behaviors and discovering what it truly meant to exist as myself. In those months, I also began to build relationships outside the confines of my family. I met someone who saw me as I was, without filters, without masks, without pretense. He was a biochemist, quiet but passionate, who appreciated logic and detail, and shared my fascination with overlooked patterns in life. With him, silence was not awkward. It was rich, comforting, and full of understanding. I didn't have to explain every thought or qualify every emotion. He simply noticed, and that simple noticing changed how I viewed connection. The more I embraced life on my own terms, the less the past weighed on me. I didn't need my family's validation to feel whole. I no longer checked for who was watching, no longer measured my worth against their approval, no longer worried about performing to earn affection or recognition. My energy previously spent trying to belong was now available for growth, learning, and connection with people who saw me clearly. Despite this newfound freedom, the story of the mural lingered in my mind, not as a wound, but as a lesson. It reminded me of the cost of invisibility and the quiet power of observation. It reminded me that exclusion is often silent, subtle, and intentional. And it reminded me that reclaiming one's voice doesn't always require anger or confrontation. Sometimes it requires patient strategy and the courage to simply exist fully without apology. The public response to my talk also opened unexpected doors. Invitations to speak at conferences, write articles, and share my story grew. People resonated with the experience of quiet exclusion, of navigating life, feeling overlooked, and of reclaiming power through knowledge and self-awareness. I realized that my experience was not unique, even if my circumstances were. Others had been erased, overlooked, or underestimated, and seeing someone step forward with clarity and calm could be transformative. Meanwhile, my family's lives continued without me. I didn't attend the downsizing of their house or their modest Thanksgiving gatherings. I didn't need to. The mural, the lawsuit, and the unfolding consequences had permanently shifted the dynamic. I had become a factor they couldn't control, a truth they couldn't ignore. The life I wanted was no longer tied to their perception of me, and that independence was priceless. I started documenting more of my story, not as an act of revenge, but as a way to validate the quiet struggles many face. Masking social exhaustion and invisibility are often misunderstood, but sharing those experiences gives context and insight to people who have been overlooked. For me, this was also therapeutic, a method to reclaim narrative authority over my own life. And while the mural was gone from their lives, it remained vivid in mine, a reminder that invisibility can be temporary, but awareness, preparation, and courage can change everything. I learned that recognition and respect are best claimed through self-awareness, evidence, and deliberate action, not by waiting for others to grant them. Life began to feel lighter. For the first time, I wasn't navigating the world as an invisible participant trying to anticipate every expectation or soften every word to avoid criticism. I had stopped performing, and with that came an unfamiliar but welcome sense of calm. Every interaction felt less like a test and more like a choice. I could show up as I was unfiltered, and it was enough. This freedom changed how I approached work, friendships, and even my own hobbies. I invested in what mattered to me, not what would make others think I belonged. The mural, the family drama, and the lawsuit became tools for understanding myself, rather than sources of resentment. I realized that the quiet, methodical way I had always observed life, writing notes, collecting details, noticing patterns, was not a flaw, but a skill. I could see dynamics others missed, anticipate moves before they happened, and act deliberately. It wasn't about control. It was about clarity. For once, clarity was empowering rather than exhausting. As my confidence grew, I reconnected with passions I had shelved during years of self-editing. Writing became more personal research, more exploratory, and teaching more honest. I began giving talks on neurodivergence and social masking, addressing audiences who had never felt fully seen in their own lives. My story resonated. People recognized the fear of being invisible, the exhaustion of performing to be tolerated, and the subtle but devastating pain of exclusion. Their responses reminded me that my struggles weren't unique, they were shared, and sharing them gave those struggles weight and meaning. Outside work, my personal life blossomed quietly but profoundly. My relationship with my partner deepened because we both valued presence over performance. Silence wasn't awkward. It was comforting. Conversations weren't rehearsed, they were honest. Emotional responses didn't require qualification, and boundaries were respected without debate. I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit expectations. In that quiet, I discovered a new rhythm: trust in myself, trust in others, and the realization that connection thrives when authenticity is valued over appearances. Looking back, I recognized the subtle ways my family had tried to maintain control. The mural was just one example, but there had always been a system of oversight, judgment, and unspoken rules. Being erased from the family tree, laughed at, or dismissed wasn't random. It was strategic. It was designed to keep me compliant, to prevent me from questioning the family structure, and to ensure that my contributions were acknowledged only as long as they served them. Understanding this didn't breed anger. It bred insight. It taught me that the only power I could truly rely on was my own. Over time, the story of the mural, the lawsuit, and the exposure of hidden accounts became a defining moment in my life. I wasn't just a passive observer of injustice anymore. I was a participant in shaping accountability. My siblings and parents could no longer dismiss me. But more importantly, I didn't need their acknowledgement to validate my existence. I had found my voice, and it was steady, calm, and deliberate. Even as I moved forward, I felt compassion for myself and strangely for them. Years of hiding, masking, and trying to earn affection had exhausted all of us in different ways. I realized that resentment would only keep me tied to their expectations. By stepping back, I reclaimed my narrative. I chose independence over validation, action over complaint, and presence over performance. Every decision became a reflection of my priorities, not theirs. And then there was the unexpected joy of observation, watching the ripple effects of honesty and accountability. Elise's brand struggled publicly, investors pulled out, and scrutiny grew. My family had to reckon with the consequences of decisions they had taken for granted. I didn't orchestrate every detail. I simply acted with integrity, documenting evidence, sharing knowledge, and allowing the truth to unfold. The difference between survival and empowerment became tangible. It was not in the drama, but in preparation, clarity, and consistent action. By now, the family dynamic had shifted permanently. I was no longer a participant in their games, nor did I wish to be. My parents moved, downsized, and adapted without my involvement. I could observe without being drawn into cycles of performance or expectation. I could invest my time in meaningful pursuits, work I cared about, relationships that respected me, and a life built intentionally rather than reactively. The mural was still vivid in my memory, but it no longer symbolized exclusion. It symbolized awakening. For the first time in my life, I felt wholly myself. Not the person others wanted me to be. Not the silent, dutiful, overlooked child. Just me. Free, accountable to my own choices, and unbound from a family structure that had never fully accepted me. And in that freedom, I discovered something unexpected: peace. Not the empty calm of compliance, but the deep, fulfilling peace of authenticity earned through observation, patience, and deliberate action. The first mornings without family oversight felt almost strange. I woke up without rehearsing a smile or measuring my words. Coffee in hand, I watched the sunlight spill across my apartment, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was hiding in plain sight. I was visible to myself first, and that visibility was enough. No one had to notice me to validate my presence. I finally noticed me. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Old habits of overthinking and self-doubt still lingered. But the difference was profound. I no longer let them dictate my reality. Every decision became mine, measured by intention, not obligation. I nurtured relationships that were authentic, rejected those that weren't, and embraced work that reflected my passions rather than social expectation. I even discovered joy in silence, long stretches of unstructured time that used to terrify me. I learned that being alone didn't mean being lonely. It meant being free to think, plan, and simply exist. The story of the mural, the lawsuit, and the hidden accounts became part of my public narrative, though I had no desire to dramatize it. When I spoke at conferences about neurodivergence, social masking, and inclusion, I shared my experience honestly, but without bitterness. Audiences connected instantly because the pain of invisibility is universal in some form, and the relief of authenticity is something almost everyone craves. Comments poured in: people who had masked for decades, people whose contributions were ignored, people who were quietly exhausted from performing to fit in. They told me I had given them a wordless permission to stop hiding. And in doing so, I realized that my journey had transformed from one of personal vindication to a broader purpose. Romantic life followed a similar trajectory. My partner appreciated the quiet, genuine version of me. There were no pretenses, no calculated behaviors, just connection built on honesty. He didn't flinch when I expressed discomfort or set boundaries. Conversations where direct laughter was unforced and companionship wasn't conditional. For the first time, I experienced intimacy, not as a performance, but as a mutual exchange of trust. It was a reminder that relationships could exist without masks if the right people were involved. I also watched the consequences of truth unfold in my family. Elise's business faltered, investments withdrew, and legal scrutiny intensified. My parents adapted to downsizing and a quieter life, learning slowly and painfully that attempts to erase me had long-term consequences. But their missteps no longer affected me directly. I observed, I noted, and I acted when necessary, but my emotional energy was no longer consumed by their mistakes. They had been a crucible, shaping the skills, patience, and resilience that allowed me to thrive independently. Reflection became a daily practice. I thought about the mural, the 112 names, and my omission, not with anger, but with understanding. Being erased was a form of teaching. It forced me to develop awareness, patience, and meticulous planning. It showed me the difference between visibility and recognition, between performing to belong and existing authentically. And when I finally understood that lesson, I no longer sought approval from those who had withheld it. My energy went into building a life that aligned with my values, not theirs. The freedom I discovered wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet force that shifted every corner of my existence. I could work on projects without seeking validation, speak at events without fearing judgment, and navigate relationships without rehearsing interactions. The sense of power didn't come from revenge or litigation. It came from reclaiming control over my own narrative. The mural was no longer a symbol of exclusion, but of awakening, a reminder that sometimes the absence of recognition can illuminate the path to self-awareness and agency. Ultimately, the experience shaped the person I was becoming, deliberate, self-aware, and unapologetically present. I learned that true influence doesn't come from forcing others to see you, but from understanding your own worth and acting in alignment with it. Being erased taught me that my visibility isn't dependent on permission. My life, my choices, my story, these are mine. The lesson was clear: respect yourself enough to stop seeking validation from those who would never give it freely, and you will discover strength, clarity, and peace in ways you never imagined. I no longer look at the mural as a wound. I see it as the moment that catalyzed growth, independence, and authenticity. It was a spark that ignited a life of self-respect, purpose, and deliberate action. Every day since, I have chosen presence over performance, honesty over pretense, and freedom over obligation. In reclaiming myself, I found not only empowerment, but a profound sense of peace, the kind that comes from knowing that your life belongs to you, and no one can erase that. The truth is simple but powerful: people may try to erase you, undervalue you, or overlook your existence. But the real strength lies in noticing, acting deliberately, and refusing to be defined by others' perception. Once you claim your own narrative, you are unstoppable. And in that space, finally, you can be fully, unapologetically yourself. So, if you've ever felt invisible, dismissed, or overlooked, remember this: you have the power to rewrite your story, reclaim your space, and choose authenticity over acceptance. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below if this story resonates with you, because no one should have to fight alone to be seen.